Oxygen Blast technical seminars are an Intertech production. For instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.
Once you've downloaded your JDK and you've installed it, you'll notice that there are typically two folders that are set up. You have the JDK folder and your JRE folder. The JRE folder, remember, does not include any tools to create or develop Java applications. It's the minimum amount of software that must be installed on a machine in order to run a Java app. So what you're going to be working with primarily as a developer are the tools that are found in the JDK folder. If we were to take a look inside this JDK folder, you'll see several children folders: bin, db, demo, include, JRE, lib, and sample. Let's take a look at each of these. The bin folder is going to contain all the executables you need. So if you want to compile a program, you want to debug a program, you want to run some documentation tools, you're going to find that all inside of the bin directory. The DB folder contains Sun Microsystems distribution of the Apache Derby database, which is a nice lightweight database that you can use in your applications if desired. The demo and sample folders are exactly as they sound. They contain some code for you to look at to help understand Java quite a bit more. The include folder contains header files. So if you need to communicate from your Java program to applications written in C or C++, you're going to need tools that are found inside of the include folder. The JRE folder, remember, just contains the things that you need to be able to run your Java application. There are no tools that you would be using as a Java developer in order to write a Java application. The lib folder contains all of the Java API libraries that come with Java. Specifically, it contains something called tools.jar, which is all the standard Java classes that you'll want to use inside of your program. If you're curious about how those are written, you can find the source.zip file, src.zip. That will contain all the source code that is found for the classes written in tools.jar. All right, now that you have the JDK and understand how that's used, it's time to look at your first Java program. And like most courses, we'll start with the traditional Hello World program. The code that you're seeing here could be created in any text editor or an IDE such as Eclipse or NetBeans. So there's a lot of different concepts that are happening in this code. And if I was to break down each of these words, you'd find that we have entire chapters dedicated in this class that are for specific concepts that you're seeing here. For example, public, that's dealing with access control, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later in this class. We have a chapter just on static. We have a chapter on classes. We have a chapter on arrays. You see a string written there with 2 square brackets. That signifies that we're using a string array. And again, we have an entire chapter on arrays. So if this feels a little confusing at first, don't worry. We're kind of looking at this at a 50,000 foot view, and we're going to dive deeper throughout this course. But let's take a look at this program and break it down a bit. The code that you're seeing here would be saved in a file called helloworld.java. Now, Java is a case-sensitive language. So when I save this in a file called helloworld.java, it needs to match the exact spelling and case of the name of the class. What's the name of the class? Well, you see where it says public class hello world in the first line. Hello world is the name of the class. So we take that name, we add the suffix Java, all in lowercase, and that's how we save the file. The keyword public before class makes this class accessible outside of this file. And it's also going to force that file to be named helloworld.java. Because the files and public classes must have the same name in Java, you create a new file for every public class. The next line is where we're declaring a method. So a method is something that can be called, and it will run some sort of code. So the method here has a name, and that name is called main. So let's break down this main method. We have public and static first. Public and static are known as modifiers. All you really need to know at this time is that means public means anyone can call it, and static means you do not need an object created in order to be able to call this method. Now, if that's a little confusing, again, we're going to break these down even further throughout this class. But let's push that aside and look at the rest of that line. So we have void, main, then we have some parentheses, string, some square brackets, and args. Void, this is known as a return value. And what that means is once this method is done executing, what will it return to whoever called it? If it's not going to return anything, we write void. So that means this method is going to do a little bit of work, and then it's going to be done. It's not going to return anything to whoever called it. The next word is main, and of course, again, that's the name of the method. And in the parentheses are parameters. We're saying, what could someone calling this method pass in to us? And here you see string with the square brackets. That means we have a string array, an array of strings. Next to that, we have an identifier, args. And all that means is inside of this method, whenever I want to refer to the array of strings that was passed into me, I will use the identifier args. Now, in this particular example, we're not doing anything with that array, so you don't see args used again. After that, you see a curly brace. The curly braces in Java programs really denote scope, really denote ownership. So how on the top line where we have public class hello world and a curly brace, it's matched. These are perfectly nested, so it's matched with the very end closing curly brace, meaning everything inside of here belongs to the class hello world. With the main method with the two curly braces, we're saying everything between these two curly braces is what's executed whenever someone calls this method. So what's going to be executed? It's going to print out hello world. System is a class. We'll talk about that in a little bit. It has a property that's accessible called out. And once we have that object, we're able to call a method called printline, hello world. And what this is going to do is simply display out on the console, hello world, just that text. Now, a little bit more about the main method. Main isn't just your average method. This is a very special method, and it's the front door to your application. Main is what the JVM will call to start your application. So again, this is the front door. Now, in order to be able to find the special method, you have to follow certain conventions. The first convention is that it must be public and static. Now, the order of modifiers doesn't really matter. It could be public static, it could be static public, that doesn't matter. But it does need to have those two modifiers. The second requirement is that the return value should be void. Now, here I can't just sort of randomly put the word void anywhere and hope that this is going to work. This has to be to the left of the has to be to the left of the name of the method, immediately to the left. So the name of our method is main. Main must be all lowercase. I can't have a capital letter M. It won't find the method otherwise. Remember, Java is a case-sensitive language. It must take an array of strings. Now, you'll see that the square brackets are up against the type string. And that's the format that I actually recommend. But strictly speaking, you could also put those square brackets to the right of the identifier, args. So it needs to take an array of strings, but where you put those square brackets, if it's to the right of the string or to the right of the args, it doesn't really matter. Also, that identifier args, that's up to you. That's just simply an identifier, an alias that you're going to be using inside of your method should you want to use and address those array of strings. So I could have had this a string array and called it JSON if I wanted to, instead of args. It wouldn't be clear what I'm trying to do in the program, but that's permissible. And now let's take a look at these different main method declarations. Some of these will work and some of these won't. Now the first one, public static void main, string args, that'll work. That's exactly what the JVM is looking for. The next line, static public void main, string command line arguments. Again, that's going to work as well. Remember, modifiers, such as static and public, which are to the left of the return type, can be in any order. So that's okay. We have void and we have main, and main is all lowercase. Perfect. The rule with those square brackets to denote an array, that could be to the right of the type string or to the right of the identifier. So that's perfectly fine. And remember, the actual name of the identifier doesn't matter. We have to say it's an array of strings, but you could call it args, you can call it command line arguments, you can call it whatever you want. So the first two work fine. The third one does not work. And the reason is, look where the void is. The void has now been placed to the left of one of our modifiers. That is not permissible. Void must always be to the immediate left of the name of the method. And the rest of that looks fine. On the fourth line, public void main, we're missing one of our modifiers, static. So that also won't be called by the JVM. Public static void main, string args. This is on our fifth line. That won't work because we're missing the square brackets for the strings. Instead of having an array of strings, we're saying we're going to take a single string. Public static void main, again, the problem with spelling here in case sensitivity, main must be in all lowercase. So again, if you name your method that, it'll compile. It's a valid method declaration, but it's not the exact method, the front door that your JVM is looking for.
For more free learning resources and to see the latest lineup of our instructor-led.net, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.